So I've come down to the garden early today because the weather is supposed to get pretty horrid later in the day. So I finished the tomatoes and some of the sweet peppers, all of those that I'm planting in the two big greenhouses. I've got the aubergines in. So today it's all about potting up the remaining peppers and the chilies, and they're going to go in our other greenhouse. Now that means I've got to move all of the propagation gear out of there because I've been using that for my seed sowing. And well, we do have the really small greenhouse, one that was donated to us, and I shall move the propagation stuff in there, well, as however much will fit, and that's where I'm going to be doing my sowing from now on. So I've got a bit of rearranging to do, but the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the plants and make sure they are happy with their new overnight conditions. So we moved this old polycarbonate box outdoors. And we've got our squash plants in here, or some of them. We covered them with some extra fleece just to make sure they didn't get too unhappy in the night. Well, actually, they're not looking too bad at all. Well, the fleece is gone. But the squash plants are looking quite content here. And this is a nice warm wall they're up against. It gets afternoon sun, it's going to soak up some of that warmth and hopefully keep them happy overnight. I don't suppose conditions are much worse in here than they are in the greenhouse, so they should be happy here. These great big ones are the blue Hubbard squash. Monstrous plants, I mean, they're already in 7.5 litre pots. I had to move them on from, I don't know whether they were in 3 or 4 litre pots, but yeah, they've got incredible root systems and they are really vigorous plants. Well, they look like they've coped with their changing conditions okay. I'm just going to check on the polytunnel and the greenhouses. There's no sign of any problems with these. These look quite content here. They're not drooping or anything. They don't seem to have suffered from a cooler evening than they're used to, so I think these are fine. Well, everything looks pretty good in this greenhouse too. These are the red peppers and then an assortment of tomatoes. And on this side we have the yellow peppers. They're all looking fine. And again an assortment of tomatoes. Now, I did make a mistake when I planted those out. Those pots were pretty dry. I had given them a heavy watering 2 days before, and I was amazed at how dry that compost was, but they've really picked up. They had a good soaking yesterday, and I set that soaker hose to come on automatically this morning. That seems to be doing its job, and everything looks great there. I don't know why we're still fleecing the potatoes. I'd be much more worried about losing the tomatoes. If the weather's bad enough to damage the potatoes, I'm sure I would be losing the tomatoes as well. But it's become a bit of a habit over the last month or so. Oh, there's more flowers coming there, that's nice. These are actually looking great. They actually look better today than they did yesterday. Probably because they were a bit on the dry side yesterday. Some of these varieties are a bit droopy in their habit. This is Belmonte. This one has the habit of looking a little bit sad even when it isn't. And I think the others are looking pretty good. Well, I'm pretty pleased to see that. You never know when you move a plant how it's going to react. Any change in the environmental conditions can upset a plant a little bit, and especially when moving from conditions where they've had modest bottom heat and they've been well covered at night to keep them warm. Moving into here, they've certainly experienced colder conditions, but they don't seem to be complaining, so that's great. So the rest of my chilies and peppers, they're going into pots, and as usual I'm mixing up my own combination of stuff here. So I've got a peat-free organic multi-purpose compost. This is a little bit heavier than I would like. Here I've got some fairly sandy loam, then I've got some horse compost, and I'm going to add to that a handful or two of fish blood and bone. That should be plenty. And then give this a good mix. I do like to have a little bit of soil in my potting mix. I like the texture, and it gives a little bit more weight. So as with any potting mix, you're looking for a balance of various properties. You want it to be able to hold a reasonable amount of moisture, but to also drain quite well so that the pots don't get soggy. You want a reasonable amount of feed in there, and with the horse compost and the fish blood and bone, this will, I think, satisfy the needs of at least the chilies for quite some time. I will probably need to feed the sweet peppers a little bit more than the chilies, but this mixture will end up, I think, quite pleasant. You don't want the compost to slump or anything like that, so if you can't find what you're looking for in a ready bagged compost, it's always worth fiddling around with the materials to hand to see if you can improve the texture. And this year I don't have the sort of compost that I would really like, so I've had to do a lot more blending of different ingredients to get what I'm looking for. So I've got a variety of sweet peppers and chilies here that I'm going to be growing in the pots. I will put a list of all of the varieties in the description. I'm going to be putting these into 10-litre pots. I think that's a pretty good size. Sometimes in the past I've used 7.5 litres, but for quite a few years now I've been using 10-litre pots, and I do like to give them plenty of compost to get their roots into. With a good sized pot, it's much less likely to dry out, and also there's going to be plenty of feed in that soil, and that is ideal. So these are already in fairly good sized pots here. This particular one is Gorria, that's the Basque chili pepper. And well, there's some good root here, I think. It's just starting to wind around the bottom of the pot. This could have been moved on maybe a week ago, but I don't think that is too pot bound. This should establish very nicely in the bigger pots. So I'll nearly fill that pot and just make a bit of a hole for this one. I'm not planting these deep or anything, not with peppers. That's probably about right. What I will do is just pinch off these lower leaves. I might take those off as well, actually. Now, I was going to say this is already flowering, but actually you might just be able to make out, although this might not show up on the film, but you might be able to see there's actually a pepper in there. So this has already been pollinated. That is super. Now you can take off those early in the year when the plant is still pretty small, but these have been in big pots, I mean relatively big pots for a seedling, and I mean they've been moved on a couple of times, and I think it's all right now at this stage to leave those fruits there. So I'll just drop that in and then fill round. I'll give it a little bit of a firming, not too hard. Right, that should be absolutely fine. So all I'll do is give this a really good soaking in a minute, and that is enough. So yeah, remember to put the label in so I don't forget what I've got. Now all the varieties of sweet pepper that I'm growing in here, the Lombardo, Friggitello and Bergamo, they are all fairly small fruited. They develop long thin fruits, and I think that's the sort that is ideal for putting in this greenhouse. The larger fruited sorts are in the ground in the other greenhouses, but these should be well suited to conditions in here. So there's not much disturbance to these plants when potting them on, not from a pot that this size, and not in the way I'm doing it. I take some of these lower leaves off. Some of them are a little bit tired looking, but also it's not great to have leaves right down close to the soil where they get splashed by watering. For some reason I've got two pots there. I'm leaving a nice gap at the top of the pot here. There's no need to fill it right to the brim. That's always better for watering. Well, I might have lost my propagation setup, but I have gained a greenhouse full of sweet peppers and chilies. I've got 35 plants arranged around here, and I've got a supply pipe installed here for a watering system, and there's a timer under the bench. I've got some 4mm pipe here which I can connect up to this and provide some drip irrigation to each one of these pots. Now I did have a similar setup here before, but I took it out during the winter because it was leaking everywhere and it was old and ratty, so I'm renewing it this year, but I haven't yet got the 4mm pipe in place. I'll do that over the next week or two, and then this will pretty much take care of itself. Anyway, that is all for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.